while my panelists are getting mic'd, I can take the opportunity to introduce shortly myself and also this topic. My name is Magnus Lundin, and I'm very happy to moderate this panel. I lead the Nordic investment and asset management part of InnoEnergy, which is a European company investing and building climate tech and energy startup for the last 14 years. We are owned by European academia and industry and banks and energy companies like Siemens, Volkswagen, Santander, Total, and here in Sweden, Stena Recycling. And I think the panelists are ready, so please help me with an applause and welcome up the panelists. While they take their seats, I will just take 1 minute to frame this panel and this topic. Let's reflect short on the seriousness
nice to meet you.
of this topic.
Hi. Hey.
We really need to stop the emission of greenhouse gases, or else it's going to be really, really nasty for coming generation very soon. For example, EU aims to be carbon neutral by 2050, partly with some capturing and storage, but more or less neutral. That is legally binding in the European climate law. This week, EU also added a milestone on 90% reduction compared to 1990 by 2040. 90% reduction. That's only 15 years away. Please take a moment and consider what enormous changes that has to be done in transportation, in energy, in everyday life. It's a historical transformation where industries, jobs, and wealth will be distributed, recreated within the 15, 20 years only. And I ask myself, how can Sweden, how can Europe come on top of this? How can we create the jobs here? But luckily, we are working on it. There's a lot of tech, there is a lot of things going on. Here locally, in Gothenburg, we have industries like Volvo Cars, Volvo Group, and up in Stockholm we have Scania, leading the electrification transformation, asking for tougher regulation. And we have politicians and countries all over the world trying to stimulate and create the market to foster the transformation, overbidding with subsidies. China has done that for a long time. US is doing it with the IRA for a number of years now, and also EU for the last year. It's amazing. It's created a big market, but how can we create the supply? To do this, we're going to need a lot of innovation, and by the way, venture capital funded startup and projects. And with me here today, we have some great people who is already doing this, and we will discuss and share learnings, insights, and takeaways for your entrepreneur investors to bring with you. So with this intro, I would like to ask the panelists to shortly introduce themselves. And let's start here. Susanna, please. Who are you?
Thank you very much. This one on? Yes, now. So hi, my name is Sanna Campbell. I have a long background in the private equity industry before, but have spent the last 7 and a bit years mainly focusing on impact investing and on building and scaling large green ventures. The most well-known one these days, I guess, that I work a lot with is Northvolt, where I joined the team 7 years ago, and H2 Green Steel, where I'm also on the board. So that is where I spend most of my time.
Very exciting. Matthieu?
Hello everyone, I'm Matthieu de Chanville. I first did a career in strategy consulting. I've been a partner at A.T. Kearney and BCG, and fast forward in 2017, I joined Renault Nissan Mitsubishi Alliance to create their corporate venture capital fund, Alliance Ventures, build a team and invest in automotive-related technology across the world, mostly in the US, in Asia, Europe, and Israel. And in 2021, I created with 3 other co-founders Shift for Good, an Article 9 impact fund focused on the decarbonization of transportation. We have offices in Paris, France, and in Singapore, and very soon in the Nordics as well. So that's me.
In the Nordics too, that sounds good. Shiva?
Yes. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Shiva Kianpoor. I have a background in mechanical engineering actually, but I started in Saint-Gobain 3.5 years ago. We are one of the biggest construction companies based in France, or coming from France. We are in over 70 countries today, and I am part of the corporate venturing team. So we look for startups in construction, but also other advanced material sectors. We come in early stage, and I'm happy to be here and talk about innovations here.
Very exciting. We will get back to the topic of startups, corporates working together. Michelle.
Good morning, everyone. I am Michelle Capiod. My background is in private equity and venture capital. I've spent the last 20 years investing in both scale-ups and buyouts. And a couple of years ago, I co-founded a firm called Blume Equity. We're a European climate tech growth fund, investing thematically with an impact lens in European scale-ups to help address the challenges we are facing. And in terms of base, we are present both in London and in Amsterdam. I'm Swedish by background, so I spent a lot of my time in the Nordics, so really pleased to be here.
Thank you. It's great having you all here. Maybe coming back to you, Susanna, if we zoom out a little bit and just identify what kind of projects, what kind of startups are we talking about? Are we going to talk about in this panel? The last panel, it was about SaaS and the role that SaaS can play and software for climate startups. But here we're going to talk a bit about hardware and bigger industrial projects, right? So, from your experience, what do you see as the most needed onwards to be able to do these big projects?
I would say that we basically talking about three things that I think are really important. And one thing, the first thing I didn't think I'd sit here and say, because I'm a believer in entrepreneurship and private enterprise, but I do think that the importance of public intervention has been becoming incredibly clear for us all. And look at a company like Northvolt for the last 7 years and the role that the EU has played and will keep on playing in terms of regulation and initiatives like the CBAM. Look at the IRA and the direct effects that the IRA has had on companies and strategies like Northvolt, for instance. So I think the public side is not to be forgotten, and the regulator plays an extremely important role in terms of which startups will be developed and which areas will we see the most development in. The second one I think you alluded to a bit, and that is the importance of partnership. Many startups are used to kind of, you develop your product a bit by yourself, but I think this importance of actually teaming up is, it can't be emphasized enough. If you look again at companies like Northvolt, H2 Green Steel, we are completely dependent on our customers, and this is a team effort that we're doing. So without a Volkswagen or without a BMW or Volvo here, Volvo cars here, there would be no Northvolt. So finding those kind of partnerships, and I would actually encourage corporates to be inclined to take even more risk on those kind of partnerships. Because as a corporate, many corporates, they obviously need to change. They need to do the green transition. But doing that is very difficult to do by themselves. Whereas if you then partner up and you end up ahead of the rest of the industry, it's such an opportunity in terms of capital, in terms of talent attraction, in terms of just, well, your P&L, because CO2 will cost. That is something that we do know. The third thing I would say is that, and obviously we're here to talk about innovation, and new innovations are needed, yes, but there is a tremendous potential in only scaling existing solutions. So we, and obviously Northvolt is not built on necessarily that innovative battery technology, and H2 Green Steel is not built on new innovative green steel technology. The technologies are there. We need to achieve huge scale so that we can enable industries to really transform. So that is what I think is needed. To enable industry transition, we need companies that really scale.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think you touch on what I think is a number of really important points. It's big scale projects, it's long term, and when we talk about collaboration with corporates, it's not only by doing a small pilot, something actually by committing, buying a lot of the products for a long time.
Yes.
In order to motivate the investment.
And that is how you unlock the big pockets of financing, obviously, as well, for these projects. It's in true partnership, and it's in big commitments from the corporates.
Yeah, and the public side, we really need their support, both to compete with the competition for China in the US, or use the opportunities, but also because it's so massive investment and transitions and so on. Thirdly, I think it's very interesting what you point out, that it's partly off-the-shelf technology, but it's about organizing the big industrial endeavors, right? Very interesting. If I maybe look at you, Shiva, when we talk about what kind of companies we are looking for, from your perspective, with your industry, what tech are you looking for? Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Especially for tackling climate issues, I would say we have three main enablers that we are looking for as well within the CVC team. One of them is digital construction solutions. I think digital in every conservative sector, it's coming. In construction, it's been a bit slower, unfortunately, but there are a lot of solutions that are helping us get better and get more sustainable. For example, carbon counting for projects in construction, or marketplaces to find the better products, the more sustainable products. So that's the first one. The second one being circular economy, big topic in construction right now, trying to extend the life cycle of the products that we have, or trying to find alternatives that are bio-based or maybe better in the data. And also trying to educate more. So those kind of topics in circular economy. And the last one, which I also see in sustainability, is increasing productivity in construction. So construction is not very productive. The increase of the productivity has been, I think, 1% in the last 10 to 20 years. It's because it's the same processes like 50 years ago. It doesn't really change a lot. But I think if we manage to increase productivity by reducing time, by reducing resources, reducing waste, we will have a lot of leverage in that. So those are the three main important things we are looking for.
Super interesting. So efficiency, processes and so on, bio-based. We don't only need to electrify stuff, we also need to have raw material, building material that is bio-based, not fossil-based, and so on. And also the digital aspects. Very interesting. Please, Michelle and Matthieu, any comments on what's been discussed so far?
Yeah, I would add to what Susanna said in terms of, it requires so much collaboration. We have so little time. I mean, I think one of the things you mentioned at the outset is we are 10, 15 years away. Today, in the news, you can read that 2023 has been the hottest year on record. We've been on average above 1.5 degrees for the year. I think we have all the red warning signs flashing, but I think the other thing I would add in terms of components we need are new funding models. I think public support is really important, but I think to all the asset managers and the pension funds out there, the whole model of how to fund VC funds and investors needs to change. We need essentially to combine what are very capex intensive investments with higher risk, and that's something that we don't really have a good model for today. And so I think we need to have longer investment horizons. We need funds that can hold investments for longer and have a very different approach when it comes to climate investments, because it's effectively a combination, in my mind, of two sectors. It's infrastructure on the one hand, which is typically high capex intensity, low risk. And then on the other hand, we have venture capital, high risk, and historically that model has been very successful in asset-light businesses, SaaS models. And so there is a fundamental shift that needs to happen as well.
I'm interested to hear your comment, Matthieu, but just one first. How do you foresee? How will it look? What models of funds will we have in, say, like 10 years?
My hope is that we will have much more long-term capital that thinks in terms of incorporating risk in a different way. I think our financial model of risk return doesn't take into account climate risk and externalities appropriately. So I think we underestimate risk in many ways. And if you start doing that and you have a longer horizon, I think it'll be a lot easier to give the time needed for some of these fundamental new technologies to develop and succeed.
Thank you. Matthieu, Article 9 Fund, what's your perspective?
Yeah, so we focus on transportation, but I wanted to comment on the collaboration. Of course, when it comes to integrating a technology in a vehicle, be it a car, a truck, or a vessel, a boat, a startup will need a strong collaboration with many players across the value chain, tier ones, manufacturers, etc. And also, for example, when we talk about vehicle to grid, for example, integration, you need utilities to work with car makers, with charging point operators and manufacturers. So aligning all these people together with the startups also that brings the innovation is key. And that's why we, as a venture capital fund, we have institutional investors, but we really like, and we have more than a dozen of corporate LPs with whom we really try to collaborate very strongly to support the startups to find their roots within this ecosystem, and activate our network to help them really find the right go-to person, use cases, and we invest a lot of resources and effort there. And for example, that's also why we believe, as a VC fund, we need to be really a catalyst of these cooperations. For example, EIC has built a scaling club with intent to identify 100 startups or scale-ups, supporting them to become unicorns and more. And we have taken the presidency of the mobility and transportation vertical in order to foster the ecosystem of startups, corporates, and institutions to find, identify, and support, in fact, this startup in scaling. So collaboration across the value chain is key, and we believe that, especially in this climate tech topic, where it is a lot with hardware and with multi-party collaboration to succeed, we believe that venture capital funds must be really active in fostering this collaboration.
Yeah. I think you said something very, very important, that the investor has, as I interpret it, a more important role to catalyze the partnership and the ecosystem, I think you put it. And also coming back to your comments, I think these type of startups, industrial endeavors, we need, as investors, we need to foster and foresee a number of investment rounds onwards, and really be able to help to set that up. Yep. Would you agree? Mm-hmm.
But I guess, if I am allowed to comment,
Absolutely.
One issue, at least if we look at the early journey of Northvolt, is that many VC funds are actually quite small. So we ended up trying to talk to VC funds, but none of them could actually provide the capital we needed. So we needed to go outside that box pretty quickly. But I very much agree that the traditional VC model is a little bit obsolete in terms of these really big industry transition projects that are going on, because it doesn't really, the model doesn't quite work. And very capital intense. Well, we need industry to transform, obviously. We need industry to invest in green, and those investments are big.
Yeah.
So.
If we stay on that topic a second, what kind of investors do we need to complement the VCs for projects like that?
Well, to be honest, I think if you look at something like the Northvolt cap table, where we see very big institutional investors, global money, institutional money, private equity-like capital, so not the private equity funds with the most kind of contained mandates, they can't really do that. But if you have a slightly more flexible mandate, private equity funds can also enter. But that took us a while to crack that, to be honest, to find those pockets of money and to find a model so that something like Northvolt worked for those investors. But it's global capital, and it's big pockets, deep pockets out there.
Yeah, thanks. I think Northvolt is breaking a lot of new ground for many projects to come.
And I would like to see more Swedish investors follow.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Good.
still have too few of them.
Good topic. Michel, from your perspective, maybe you can elaborate a little bit about I think about the funding gaps in the market. If we compare, for example, US and Europe, and with this perspective, what's your take?
We're clearly behind in Europe when it comes to large-scale funding. I think historically in Europe we've been more risk-averse than our US counterparts. And that has manifested itself in terms of smaller funding rounds typically. So while we have, I think, a phenomenal, thriving early-stage ecosystem of VC funds in Europe, the problem comes when you start to scale. So what Susanna said, we need large-scale funding for climate in particular, but I think there is a real gap at the growth stage, and this is, I think, the weak link in Europe at the moment that we are hoping partially to address, but I think it requires, again, collaboration, and I think what we're really missing in Europe is more incentives and government incentives in particular. In Europe, I think we've been quite good at regulation. We're good at using the stick a lot, but we're not so good at providing the carrot. And the carrot brings the investors because it changes the risk-return profile. And so if we could do that, that would be, I think, a game changer. So we're definitely behind the US today. And I think the EU Green Deal is great in many ways, but it's very small in comparison to the IRA and what it does for US-based projects.
Thanks. Please, any comments? Just take the mic. Changing topic a little bit.
Sorry, can I throw in one comment?
Yeah, please.
But I think your point is really important in terms of the VC model. And like I was saying, the traditional way, if you give up 20% of your company for X amount of capital, with these large-scale projects, you end up as an entrepreneur being so diluted by the time you've raised the amount of money you need that model doesn't really work. So we need to find new structures and again, new creative ways of making sure the team who are driving this have the right incentives and actually have some incentives at the end of line as well.
Yeah, very true. But I would argue also that still we need an entrepreneurial perspective of seeing new opportunities, getting stuff together, and maybe the VC's perspective of helping them to organize and foster and map out the journey and so on. But then it's a kindly different journey.
Yeah.
I would like to come back to the corporate collaboration. Maybe if I may start with you, Shiva. How can we get corporates to be more open for general startup collaboration, so to say?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I agree, I think it was said already, and also yesterday I heard it as well, that corporates are slower mostly when working with startups and innovations, especially in construction, because it's very conservative and it's very a different mindset sometimes. It might take a little bit more of work of convincing or storytelling and showing where the journey could go. Especially in collaboration with VCs, because we see a lot of startups. They of course approach VCs first and then come to us as well. I would wish for kind of an openness to understanding the way a corporate works. It's always, of course, slower because we have a lot of people that we need to involve along the process. And for example, for us, we always look for a collaboration because we want to add value to the startup as well, and that takes time, of course. So we are unfortunately slower. We wish we would be a bit faster, but I think if we had the right partners, as like VCs, but also other stakeholders in the ecosystem, and trying to tell the right stories to our business people who are maybe a little bit skeptical, that might help a little bit to try to change the mindset, at least start trying to do that.
Maybe a quick follow-up question. Why is it important for corporates to work with startups?
Yeah, it's very important for us to work with startups to keep up with the fast-changing, space, keep up with the newest technologies, especially if you want to be more sustainable, if you want to achieve our net zero goals at some point. I don't think that we would achieve them the way that we are doing business today. So we need new technologies, and it's always a lot slower when you do it your own. So it's like do it your own or try to find it external. And we at Nova try to bring it more to our businesses. You don't have to do everything yourself. You have motivated young people that have the expertise that can do it, and we want to work with them to bring in the innovations.
I think many people here is very happy to hear what you described. Yeah, being in the automotive heart of automotive here in Gothenburg, and having you here, Matthieu, can we double click a little bit on the transportation area and on these notes? How does this startup collaboration relate to the value chains and so on in the automotive industry? So you see it.
First thing is we are here on the panel on climate tech, but to give a perspective, transportation globally, it's responsible for more than 8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year. So it's approximately 23% of the total GHG emissions. And in Europe, it's even more, closer to 30%. So it's an important topic when you want to address climate change. And that's transportation primary factor is with road, but I mean maritime, air, and rail are also contributors to these emissions. And it touches all aspects of the value chain, from raw material extraction, rare earth, metals, innovative materials that must enter into the production of goods, vehicles, recycled materials or recyclable materials. Manufacturing needs to be transformed, logistics, services, and recycling also must be built in order to ensure a minimum impact for the entire life cycles of vehicles or ships, etc. So it touches a lot of different aspects and players and industries. And for most innovations that I see, you need a collaboration across those value chains. I have invested in companies that have great technologies, startups that have great technologies that need to be integrated into cars, for instance. You can do pilot projects with car makers successfully, but to really scale and integrate the technology, you really need a strong will of collaboration from both the tier one manufacturers, the car manufacturers, and that takes time and efforts. And this collaboration is really key. But what I see is, in the past decade, in the automotive industry, there has been a big shift where going from working in silo and trying to develop on its own the new technologies and with internal R&D for car makers to a real stronger collaboration among players, large corporates from the automotive world. So you see many partnerships between car makers and car makers where there are equipment manufacturers together with startups. I can give you an example. In France, the Renault Group has fostering the creation of a consortium with 5 other large groups, like Orange Telecom Operator, Dassault Systems, Atos, Thales for cybersecurity, and ST Microelectronics for semiconductors, to develop software for connected vehicles in a sustainable way. And that is quite fruitful. But they do that together with startups, in fact. Yeah. I think that's a good model. And I understand that here in Sweden, X Mobility Labs is trying to do something similar, fostering collaboration among corporates together with startups, in fact. Yeah.
Yeah. And that is so cool what you described, that it's actually a fact now that they're working in that way. Yeah. Talking about startup perspectives and focuses, Michelle, what kind of startups are you looking for? Or projects?
Yeah, so maybe starting very high level, we are looking for companies that we think can successfully scale and where there is a linear correlation with environmental impact. So that's absolutely fundamental for us. And then as a scale-up investor, we are typically looking for companies that can demonstrate attractive unit economics. I think this has become more important across the investor universe in recent months and in the last year, where historically or in the last several years, growth was priced as something that was absolutely fundamental. I think we are much more balanced in that we like growth, but we also like profitability metrics. So striking that balance in terms of finding the unit economics early on is important. So we are not necessarily looking for companies that are profitable on the bottom line when we invest, but we need to see that the unit economics stack up so that it is a model that works when it scales. Because ultimately, as investors, we are looking for companies that can generate cash in the long run. So that's really important. And I guess in terms of themes, we're really excited about the moment. We're spending a lot of time in supply chain sustainability. Maritime decarbonization is another area where we're currently deep diving and spending quite a lot of time, and think there is a huge opportunity in terms of digitalization, more generally speaking, where the industry has been rather analog to date.
Exciting. I think there is a number of startups here addressing that. Please, any general comments in the panel, or else?
No, maybe emphasize the unit economics. I think there are many headlines and stuff about companies going bankrupt right now, but I think there's still a lot of money out there for the projects with the right unit economics. But I think having a strong cost position, I think is extremely important in the long run if you are to invest a lot of the capex that you will need to get to scale. Knowing that you're actually investing in the right place and at the right terms and the right capex is extremely important.
It's great, and I think what you just described is also a bit of a revolution. We can't just fund growth, but it also have an underlying, unit economics in the products or in the business model. However, it might take some while before it's a positive cash flow, right? But it has to be there.
Yeah. I mean, I think on the positive, there is, as Susanna said, a lot of dry capital out there. I think 2024 bodes to be a very positive year in the sense that I think there is capital to invest. There's a lot of interest in climate. I mean, it's, I think by now the biggest category, if you look at it, 30% of capital deployed last year was actually into climate investments. So I think we shouldn't all be doom and gloom here. But I think there is a very clear bifurcation. The companies that can demonstrate attractive unit economics are the ones that get funded, and the ones that cannot are the ones that are unfortunately ending up in a troublesome position. So I think that's, if there's one thing I'd really focus on if I were a founder, it's really to make sure that I focus on that cost base from the start, because I think it's largely a mindset as well. Like, don't start scaling something in the hope that the unit economics will stack up one day. It will get harder and harder to fix it the longer you wait.
And just to add one thing, there are many companies being built on a hypothesis that customers and consumers will pay for more sustainable products. A lot of people say that they will, but the facts don't actually support that yet, which is why the cost position is so important. You actually need to be able to be competitive, even if your B2B customer cannot claim that towards their end customer now anyway. Hopefully we'll get there over time, but I think, very few end consumers are actually prepared to pay a premium for a green product today, unfortunately. But it's a fact that we also, as entrepreneurs and startups and investors, need to relate to.
Yeah.
I wanted to comment on what Michel said, that we see a large portion of the investment capital going into to impact companies, impact funds. I wanted to stress the fact that in Europe we have, with the Sustainable Finance Disclosure Regulation, a framework which is much more elaborated than what exists in the US, and which for me creates the good conditions to avoid greenwashing and to support more money being poured into venture capital impact funds or startups, with Article 8, Article 9, and that's a very favorable, I would say, regulatory framework. Of course, it can be cumbersome sometimes because you need to report, and then you need to be very transparent on your methodology to assess the sustainability of investments. But in the end, this transparency gives a trust to limited partners and to asset managers to invest more capital toward what their shareholders expect, which is more sustainability. So I think that's a really solid foundation for seeing more capital being invested towards climate tech and more generally impact funds and companies in Europe.
Yeah. Time is flying when you're having fun, or at least very interesting and fun. Having 1 minute to go, a quick comment from each of you. What's your main takeaway from this year's Go West Nordic Venture Capital Forum? Any reflections from this panel or from your days here? If I may maybe start with you, Susanna.
Maybe not so much from my days here as a general perception that impact investing and building green startups is obviously the space to be. The capital is there, the customer's there, the talent is there. So it's just a very, very interesting space to be in for, I believe, the foreseeable future. So totally if you're not already there, go there.
Good point. Yeah.
So it's my first Go West, and I take away with a strong will to come back next year, and with lots of connections that I will build on in the next days and months.
Excellent. Thanks. Shiva.
Yes, it's my first Go West as well. I really enjoyed the community feeling that you have in this event. That's something I will take with myself to try to also learn from other communities. How are you in the Nordics managing things? How are you discussing things? So that's for me a biggest learning, to try to kind of go with that as well in other regions that we are acting in.
Good, welcome back.
I think key takeaway, everything that's been said is true, but I think also here the collaboration is coming true. So I think a lot of this panel has been talking about the need for collaboration. You can feel it in the room. There are corporates, there are VCs, there are think tanks. We have everyone present here, and I think it's great to see it's all coming together. So it's been fantastic. Thank you.
Help me thank this great panel with a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, great panelists. Now